Hey guys, so welcome back to Conversations That Matter. And this morning's guest is all the way from beautiful Sydney in Australia, Tanya Cross. Tanya, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Seamus, for having me.
It's great to have you. Tanya, for people that are listening, and give me a wee bit of a description of who you are, what you're involved in, what you do.
I am a leadership and business mindset coach. So I have been coaching now for 14 years, and I help, now we focus purely on coaches to get their service out to the world. So that's what I do with a group coaching model. And then I also have private coaching where I help entrepreneurs and business owners to make more income and have a bigger impact.
Fantastic. And in your group at the minute, Tanya, which is how we've actually got to meet them. We've got to meet through obviously a mutual mentor of ours as well too, which we'll deep dive into as we go. But what I like to do is kind of take it right back to the start, Tanya, which is what was it like as a young Tanya Cross growing up? Where were you? Where did you grow up? What were those early inspirations? What was it like as a young Tanya Cross?
So my parents, when my brother and I were 4 and 5, my parents decided that they would take a trip around Australia. So my dad he called it the Turtle, and it was this like truck that he built a caravan on the back, and he had Turtle written on the front. And we traveled around Australia for 12 months, just the four of us. And so as a little tacker, being able to go to places like Monkey Mire, which is in the middle of nowhere in Western Australia, where you get to go and pat the dolphins, and to drive across the Nullarbor, which there's nothing around for miles and miles, to then going to beautiful tropical Queensland and just having these really enriching experiences definitely woke me up to the world, because prior to that I'd just been living in a small suburb and doing the normal routine every day, and then all of a sudden it was really different. So that really sparked something inside of me about the world around us. And then, as I guess life happens, and my dad wasn't really in a very great emotional state, which is part of the reason why we decided to, my parents had decided to travel around Australia. And so my mum tells me this story when we were in Queensland, and her mum had passed away. And she made this decision because her and my dad had this argument, and she made a decision to leave him. And so when she left him, when we came back to Australia, we came back to Victoria, and she'd made this decision, it hit my dad pretty hard. And so he was already drinking a lot and drank even more. And after some time, he decided that he would for us, because being a single parent, having to look after us, he decided that he would go to Alcoholic Anonymous. And, different people have different experiences. But for my dad, after spending time in rehab in hospital and then going to AA, it was really life-changing for him. So it was my first experience and exposure to the personal development world. So he had gone and had this down and out, and he was heavily drinking and, wallowing in his sorrow and his pain and his suffering. And then he goes into hospital, he goes through a rehab program, and then goes and does his AA, and he would come home. And I just have this vivid memory when I was really nervous about something, and he's like, okay, let me teach you something that we've learned in AA. And so he has me laying down on the floor, and he's getting me to do this relaxation technique. And I'm like, whoa. So not only did I see and witness my dad transform from down and out and depressed to having a more spark in his step, because he decided he would not drink again, and he hasn't touched alcohol since. And then also going through my own transformation, just little mini ones with the information that he was teaching. I mean, I didn't know that as a 4, 5, 6-year-old, but it definitely, I on reflection, I can appreciate how that sparked something inside of me about the possibility of human transformation and potential, and what someone can be capable of if they make a decision.
And you were, what age was that then? Around 5, 6, all this was?
5, 6.
Yeah. All right.
Mm.
And obviously those things have had a massive impact on you and shaped a lot of things. At the time,
Mm.
kind of how were you dealing with it? Was it just going with the flow? You didn't really think too much about it. It was just a normal.
Um, I think, I mean, it definitely became, I could see that during that period of time, I started to notice that it was becoming difficult between my mum and my dad, because there was a lot of tension there, because my mum recoupled quite quickly. She also had two children quite quickly after the separation. And so I could see that the dynamic with my dad and my mum, and this tension, they wouldn't want to talk to each other. And it was very much when we were at their place, at mum's place, you know, we wouldn't talk about what's happening at dad's place, and dads wouldn't talk about what's happening at mum. There's really a big divide between the two homes and the two worlds. And so I just started to notice that my dad would feel really hurt when we would go, and I was quite sensitive to and maybe a little bit protective of my dad. And so one of the points came where my I call her my biological mum, because I ended up being raised by someone else. But she said, we're going to go and move into the country. So when I was 9 years old, my mum said, well, we're going to go and move into the country, three hours away from here. You can either stay with your dad, or you can come with us with the two younger kids and go into a place where you don't really know. I'm like, well, I'm just going to stay where my brother's going to stay, because he was 18 months older. So I'm like, I'm going to stay with dad. My dad had actually remarried by that stage. So he married my grade 3 and 4 primary school teacher.
Ah.
Which, yeah, I know, which is kind of not a thing. And she's also 9 years older. So he was like into cougars before cougars were even a thing. Yeah. And then on top of that, that's also became an interracial couple. Now, back then in the early 90s, that was still not okay. Well, I don't know, every country has a different thing, but there was still some taboo around that type of, relationship. And then also she was older, and then she was also my school teacher. So there was a little bit of a mix. And so that dynamic then in between my mum that birthed me and my mum that raised me, I started to feel this really big divide. So I ended up spending more time with my dad, and I just never ended up going to see my mum anymore. So I actually didn't see her until I was 16. So I didn't even remember what she looked like.
From you were
So
8?
Pardon?
And that was from you were 8? So it was 8 years?
Yeah, I was about 9. I think it was, I must have, maybe about 10 by the time I'd stopped seeing her, or 11. And then I didn't see her again until I was 16. So I still remember the first time seeing her, and I was like, whoa, you don't look like what I remember.
Yeah.
You don't, just, age. So I spent a lot more time with my dad and my mum that raised me. And so she had a really, I'm really grateful, because my mum that raised me, she's Indian. And so she was raised in a boarding school in the foothills of the Himalayas by Irish nuns.
Huh?
And yeah. And so she has this, and she has this really deep connection to God. And that came about because when she was a child and she was 6 years old, what happened was she no longer saw her dad, and she no longer saw her mum. And so she was alone as a child, but she had other friends, other peers around, but she had the nuns as the authority figure, which you can only imagine. And it's like breathing hell and fire down your, so it would have been an interesting experience. And so she just became really connected in with God. And so I remember growing up during those really formative years of my childhood and teen years, and waking up in the middle of the night and seeing my mum, because she'd wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and she'd do her prayers and she'd do her gratitudes and pray to God and do her rituals, and then she would I would observe this and watch this. And she did that day in, day out of my entire childhood. And she still does it now. She still wakes up early. She still does her prayers. And so just seeing someone be so dedicated to a spiritual mission and them doing this over and over and over again, day in, day out, and getting there's not a reward for it. There's not like someone patting you on the back, turning around saying, hey, great job. It was just this innate, consistent dedication to something greater and bigger than her. And so I felt like it's been such a formative experience for me, and something that I live my life by now. So I'm incredibly grateful to be raised by her and be raised by my dad. So I feel like the personal development had been birthed from my dad, my spiritual path, although mine doesn't come in the form of praying to God, but I feel like the work I do and the healing and the transformation that I help and the shifting of perceptions and perspectives for people has a life-changing, and it changes humanity, and it's of service to humanity. So I feel like it's my spiritual mission. It just looks a little bit different. So I feel like I'm incredibly grateful to my upbringing and the dynamics that came into play for me, because they've really formed some really beautiful like messages and meanings as a result. And I know I'm incredibly grateful, even though if I reflect on those times, it wasn't so great. You have those abandonment issues. Why am I not loved? Why does my mum want to see me or speak to me? And especially when you're a teenager and you're going through all these huge kind of changes, and it's like, well, am I not enough? And so then having that wired, which maybe that's also why I appreciate personal development, because of that perception of void and not enough has kind of definitely been a driver for a while in terms of wanting to do my own healing.
Yeah. I grew up in a Catholic family as well too, and we were all made to like kneel down at 6 p.m. and say our prayers, rosary, and I grew up around that as well. And I have full respect for people that are still like that live that way. Like for me, I probably still practiced as a Catholic up until maybe my 20s, early 20s. And then it kind of turned more into just a spiritual practice, a spiritual experience, and looking at something greater and bigger, more than just kind of a lot of the dogma that we've kind of brought up around. But again, it serves a massive purpose, and I think it's also served a massive purpose for me as well. If you go back to that then, Tanya, like if when your mum leaves, you don't see your mum for 8 years, you're in school, your father is now going to be your school teacher. What challenges was that giving you in school? Were you getting a bit of stick and getting a bit of grief from people, or?
I still distinctly remember this moment, and I'm sitting in the primary, in our primary school, and we're sitting on the netball court, and we're sitting on the concrete, and it just been raining. So when it rains, all the steam comes up, and I just remember that smell. And so I remember this moment. And some of the kids, I was not a cool kid in school, just like the whole way through, I was not a cool kid. I was a bit more like the rebel or the odd one. But at this particular time, I just distinctly remember sitting with my friend, and then all of a sudden, like so many, all the cool kids came, they sat down, they're like, oh, is your dad marrying, Mrs. Spain, she was at the time. And then everyone's like, oh my gosh, and so I'm like, wow. Sure. And then I thought, you've never even really spoken to me. I just like, you've never even spoken to me. And why are you speaking to me now afterwards? I was like, this is just odd. And then, so I just remember that, that kind of feeling. So I don't know necessarily, because I then left, because I guess my parents then, or my stepmom, or my mum that raised me, because I actually call her mum. Her and my dad chose to put me into a different school for my last year of grade 6. So I guess that was a bit challenge avoidant, potentially, because they didn't want to leave me in the school that she was no longer teaching at, and the teachers were pretty unhappy with what happened. But then I could definitely see that even in my teen years of going to high school, that I did notice that I did have a tendency to connect with some of the teachers that were more mother-like. And, there was one particular one, and her name was Mrs. Malone. And so I remember her being like such a influence for me, because I felt like that missingness of a mother. Like, I love my mum that raised me, but she definitely doesn't have, because she didn't get mothered. She definitely doesn't. She has more of a school teacher dynamic in her than like what I would perceive a mother would be, a bit more like cuddly and come here and let's chat, and
isn't
a
that
little bit.
isn't that more just a real paternal role as well too? Isn't it? Maybe like, is that just more inherent with a natural like blood parents than it would be with a parent that's maybe not? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. Like, I know definitely step parents can. I think it would be about maybe more value driven, because that I think because my mum that raised me was so much a teacher, she just couldn't help. Like, she was still a teacher at home when she was a teacher at school, so it didn't kind of change. Her public and private life was the same.
Yeah.
And so I think different people have different maybe sets of values. Like, I know with my daughter, I'm very, cuddly and touchy, but she's also very cuddly and like a little squishy. She just wants to kind of sometimes like get inside me and like cuddle and be really close and put her cheek against mine. And so that's just her personality. I think it's maybe also a dynamic for me as well. But I definitely can see that she didn't have that inside of me. And maybe that was my projection of what I thought a mum also should be. But although I didn't get cuddles from teachers, I definitely had moments with some of the female teachers where I felt them be motherly to me. Yeah.
And when you were at school then, Tanya, obviously like doing what you do right now, what did you want to do? Who did you want to become? What was it you were studying? What was it you were trying to create?
So I wasn't really sure. Like, I did have like spurts of thinking that I wanted to do teaching. And so that was something, because my mum had been a teacher, and I think that there was a little bit of an influence there. And then, but I do remember there was one particular afternoon, there was a man that came into our school. So I went to an all-girls school. So when a man comes in and a young man comes in, you think, whew, okay. For me anyway, I mean, everyone's different, and I know, people are attracted to different things, and so I'm just, my moment of seeing a boy, because going from a Catholic family where it's pretty restricted, I'm like, whoa. And so he comes in, and his name is Jimmy Steins. So he was a Gaelic footballer. And so he came to Australia and he started playing AFL, Australian football rules. And so it's like a not like soccer, but not like gridiron.
Yeah.
And so he came in and he did this inspirational talk. And so he basically just talked about how he'd moved country and how he'd been able to overcome some challenges. And then he shared that. And I thought, how amazing would it be just to be able to stand up in front on a stage and be able to move someone so much. I remember that moment thinking, wow, that's still pretty impactful. I've still got his book that he had and he gave it to us. So I found I found that moment really moving, but I didn't really have a clear idea. Like, when I finished school, I didn't have a clear idea. I was sick for the last part of my year 12. So because of that, I had to drop a subject. And so I didn't end up doing very well. Actually, I did below fail. And so I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I ended up, when I finished, my older sister was, she was a nurse.
Matter, doesn't it?
Pardon?
It shows how much it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. I think actually, even to the point of not feeling like I was successful at school, almost made me more driven, that void, and made me more driven to want to study and learn, because it was not like I didn't have the capacity. I also just had, I had a number of things that went on. Like, my dad was quite sick when I was growing up. And so there was moments of time where my dad was potentially, thinking he might have died because he was having heart issues, and he was taken in an ambulance when I was sleeping at night. And so we were never really sure, would he live or die? And so my schooling didn't become a priority. I wasn't thinking about school. I was thinking about, well, am I going to have a family home, and what's going to happen, and all of those kind of dynamics. And so coming out of school, I was like, well, my sister's like, so because my mum that raised me, she's a daughter who's 12 years older than me. So she kind of became my sister and my mum and my best friend, and everything kind of rolled into one. She's a nurse, and she said, Tanya, become a nurse. You'd be great at it. And I was like, oh, okay. I was a bit of a follower then. I'll just I'll do it. I'll give it a go. So I did. I did work in that industry for a while, but just realized my love for healing wasn't in that form.
And so you did nursing for a while, and then is it 2009? Was that the real start of your personal development journey? You got introduced to the DeMartini method?
Well, I actually did. So I did NLP before 2009. So I was already studying that, and so I had kind of started a bit of a personal development journey, and trying to learn more. I actually was doing it with my biological mum. We reconnected for that period of time, and
he's connected now. Yeah, is your mum still alive?
No, we connected, and now we're disconnected.
Okay.
That's another story. Just, um, so what happened was I did this NLP course, and so it sparked and awoken something inside of me to want to do something more. And so then I went back and I did my Bachelor of Applied Social Science in counselling, and I was doing my crisis counselling subject. And I was about to submit my last essay before I finished my course. And then at the time, my boyfriend was killed. And so it was my first experience of loss for someone who was close to me. I mean, my grandparents died, but I wasn't really, I didn't feel that close to them at that time in comparison to my boyfriend. And I just remember feeling like grief, or just feeling like I've never felt before, like my brain being like jelly, and just really struggling with just even everyday living, or just even wanting to live. There were periods of time where I was like, I just don't want to even be here. And so someone had said to me, Tanya, you have to go to the breakthrough experience. Like, you have to be there. Like, it's going to change your life. And they said it with such certainty, it almost gave me chills through my spine. And I was like, okay, I'll do whatever it takes to get there. And so that was when I did Dr. DeMartini's program, and he has the breakthrough experience, the 2-day program. And on the second day, there's 210 people in the room, and he asks who raise their hand if someone's experienced grief. And so different people are saying, like one lady said, I lost my baby while she was pregnant. Another person said, I lost my home, but it's not a loss, or I lost my job and some money. And then I put my hand up, and I'm crying. I can't get my words out. I've kind of got snot running down my nose because I'm crying so much, that moment. And I got selected, which I was incredibly grateful. So I spent an hour and 20 minutes with him on stage. And he asked 4 questions to resolve grief. So I was thinking, because of my dynamic that I had, also some of my childhood stuff, and watching other people who'd gone through grief, I thought it was a 2 to 5 year period of having to grieve before you felt like you have your life back again, 2 to 5 years. So I had already thought and projected that's what my life's going to be like. So I'm 27 years old. Maybe by mid 30s, I'll be like, okay, life will be back on track again. And so an hour and 20 minutes. I'm like, well, what? Like, if I'm going to dedicate my life to anything, this is it. Like, I felt like my love of personal development and the DeMartini method and the breakthrough experience is a very mental process, but it's also a very spiritual process too. And so I felt like it was like my whole life had been leading up to that moment, and to be awakened in such a profound way that I was like, this is what I want to dedicate my life to, and what I want to share with people. Because if it's been able to shift me in such a short period of time, it's like, well, how can I master this to then help other people, no matter what they've gone through, that they can also shift their perception, and then the whole life can change.
And I think it's so true, because we have just bought into the idea that it's something that you're going to live with, and like you have to actually bear this cross, and you don't ever get rid of it. You just learn how to deal with it and live with it. And we've been conditioned to just believe that and think that. So I lost my father in 2016, and it was I've lost loads of friends and things growing up through different things, suicides and all sorts of things. People that were close to me, aunties, uncles, etc. But when I lost my father, That's when I actually got introduced to the DiMartini method as well. Somebody gave me the book. Now, I didn't totally grasp it or understand it properly at that time, I think, because I was just deeply involved in something else. I didn't go to a course. It was just a book I was reading. But that's what led me back into the DiMartini method then in 2019. But if you go back to that time, then, Tanya, like what, if you want to share with the audience, obviously, what was the questions that was asked? And then what was the shift in your perspective in terms of how you actually just were able to look at that from a completely different way?
Yeah, so the questions is, what do you miss? Because when we appreciate, when we look at something that we perceive to have lost, we don't look at what we don't like about the individual. We only missing the things that we like. So we have to make a list there. So that's step one, or question one. Question two is then whatever you perceive that is missing. For example,
just to go on, Tanya, sorry. So for people that are listening on, as you said there now, most people will miss the things that they admire in people. And that they were infatuated with, is not right. So most people miss those things, and most people don't look at the other things that they didn't like in them, that really annoyed them, that triggered them, etc. So by doing what's that's just helping you calm down that infatuation and bring that balance back. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's just becoming aware of the and conscious of the things that you've been attached to, or you've looked up to, or that you're missing. So it's just writing those lists down. And everyone has a different length of list. It could be 4 things, but it could be 15 things. Maybe the average is more like 12. Not that there's a good or bad how many you have on the list. Everyone is different. And then the next question would be, we take one of those things that you perceive to be missing. And let's say, for example, it is just having someone to talk to and having that daily conversation and interaction. And then you go, because there's a universal law, or a law of nature, which is nothing is ever gained or lost. It's only transforming. But we live in a society that we get attached to, we almost infatuate with life, and we resent death. And so what this does is shows that life is constantly changing and morphing and changing form. And it teaches us to not get so attached to one particular form. So we want to be able to see how it morphs into different, it goes from the one to the many. So we then ask, well, who has come in to your life from the moment the individual has died until now? Who has come in, and where you've had those levels of conversation and connection? So one thing I can share, one of the things that my boyfriend had called me was Tiger. And so I just remember each time he would say that, I would feel all like warm and fuzzy inside. And I just thought, okay, like it was, and that was something that I had missed. And so when I was reflecting on like who has come into my life, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, wow, one of my people that I just met after he died, and I had done a course, she said, you have to go and find this girl. She actually lives around the corner from you, and you have to go meet her. And, you just at least connect, because she'd known what had happened. And so she was just trying to be supportive. And then I walk up to this girl's home, and I knock on the door, and she opens, and she's just got these like short spiky hair. She's wearing a singlet and no shoes. And I'm like, hey. And I was like, this person told me to come over. And she's like, oh, hey, come in. I said, but what's your name? And she's like, it's Tiger. And I'm like, I was like crying, just going, what is happening here? I got chills, I got goosebumps. It was just like, what?
Crazy.
What? Yeah. So then once we identify where it's shifted and morphed to, then we want to find of the old version, so how they displayed or demonstrated it. We want to find the drawbacks of that to take off the infatuation or attachment. So we ask, what's the drawback of their conversations or their communication, and drawback until you perceive equal drawback and benefit. And that infatuation starts to dissipate. And then you go to the new people that have displayed and demonstrated the connecting and speaking and having someone to speak to every day, and what's the benefit of them. So we lift that up, and then actually become really grateful for your life as it is. Because sometimes we can be so attached to how life used to be yesterday, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We almost get like stuck, like developmentally stuck in that particular time. We like wishing and hoping it was back there. And so what we want to be able to do is dissolve any attachment we have to that. So we can just be here and now, because here and now is so beautiful. To be present in your day and present in your life and the things that are happening and the beautiful things that you're getting surrounded by. That's a heart opening. That's feeling like you actually live life, because what happens is we can then go to our deathbed or our death moment, and then we can reflect and go, hang on, I spent so long in the past, stuck in the past, or I spent so long stuck in the future. We've forgotten to just be here right now. And so that's what that process does. It brings us back down into the present moment. And I've definitely had moments, one of the cool byproducts of doing that process, which you can find a DeMartini method facilitator, you can go see Seamus for it, is you have these little snippet moments of the individual that died. And so you just have these little moments. That's what he would do. That's a little moment of him. It's almost like a little moment and little connection with that part of him that you can feel great gratitude and appreciation for, but it isn't an attachment anymore. Because I know for me personally, if he hadn't died, I wouldn't have gone into the DeMartini method. I wouldn't have gone down the track of that happening. It was definitely one of those really big catalysts for a huge amount of change. And I still feel like that period of time for me, like his death gave me life and it's helped transform life.
Yeah.
And so, I'm incredibly grateful for that. Like, I don't know it would have taken a really big slap for me to go and do something. And I felt like that was the catalyst for huge change. So hopefully that helps to explain the process.
Yeah, 100%. I'll ask you a first question, which is, what about people will then say, yeah, but they're still not there. I've still lost the essence of that person. I still can't hug them. I still can't kiss them. I still can't talk to them. How does the method in that way help kind of relax that, dissolve that?
Well, some people still have attachment to not dissolving it or not releasing it. So, because sometimes during those periods of time, people get a lot of support and they get a lot of connection from people. And it's like, oh, well, if I was to dissolve this and it not be there, will people still want to spend time with me, be here with me, connect in, help me? And it's like, oh. And then sometimes I do remember years ago, I had this couple and I'd spoken to the gentleman, and the gentleman started doing the process together, and the lady, the mother didn't want to do the process because their child had died maybe about 3 or 4 months. So it was an infant. And then we got through about 2 lines as we were going across, and he's like, I actually don't feel like I can do anymore. And I was like, okay, let's just talk it out. And he goes, it's because I feel like if I resolve this, my wife is going to be bitter and angry towards me because it's too soon. And it's almost like the social pressure. Yeah. Because in some cultures we celebrate, and I lived in Bali for a period of time, and if an individual was old, they would be okay if they died, but there would be sadness if someone was younger and they died. And so we have these different conditionings, different cultures express and deal with death differently. But it definitely has, you have to go against social norms to be able to break this. So it's like, oh, hang on, maybe there's those layers that are around which are potentially preventing someone from actually going and working through it. So I would explore those first. If someone's still holding on and attached to it, I would ask what for what reason? What's so difficult about letting that go? And then some people, if that's nothing there and they think, no, there isn't, I'm really, really ready. It's just that they're trying to do the work or those questions in the whole individual, instead of the little the parts of the individual. And so if we can just chip away at each, we call it a trait, action or inaction, or each component that they miss or that they perceive to miss, and just work through it methodically, you'll be able to shift through it.
I think what happened with me, and I've heard John talk about it when his wife was passing, and I was doing this unconsciously because I didn't even know anything about the method at the time. But my father was bedridden for 7 years with Parkinson's. When I was around 27, 28, I think at the time. So when he went in the bed at that time, I was kind of just starting in my career and starting to move forward and grow. And in my mind, I kind of already made up that that's not him anymore. So there were certain like traits and things that I admired in him and loved in him that had already started to dissipate over the years, that had already kind of like gone. And that's part of the Martini method with the grief process as well too, which is like seeing those traits that have already gone and then they're being picked up by somebody else. Now, I wasn't conscious at the time of them being picked up by somebody else, but I was definitely conscious of them starting to go. And I'd already kind of had that process in my mind that my dad's not really there anymore. It's not really him, because at times anything, the later years, you didn't remember who it was, dementia had set on, etc. So for me, that I think that overall process of those 7 years definitely helped me deal with his actual passing a lot better, because I had seen it as a process within itself. That makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's different types of grief. And so there's a grief that is more that transient, where there's the individual that you know becomes sick and unwell, and then they're slowly passing away, or they're parts of themselves that they used to, like personality parts of themselves, they're getting lost. And then so you're gradually dealing with the grief, but it's a 7-year process of dealing with grief. Then you can have the grief where it happens suddenly and you're not even aware of it, which is, say, in my case, which is in a lot of people's cases as well. It's like, well, I didn't even know that they were sick, or or it was an accident in the case for my boyfriend. And so that, because it's a sudden, you'll have a long list and you're having to deal with it. It's quite like acute and intense, and you're having to deal with it then. But we also have other types of grief that happens, which maybe isn't so known, but it's also the complex grief. And the complex grief is sometimes it happens when, say, a couple are having an affair and they decide to break up. And then all of a sudden they're having to deal with their grief, but they have to do it in a hidden way because they don't want to show their family members of what's actually happening, because they're still so attached to this particular individual, but can't have them in their life anymore, and or whatever the dynamic has. And so that becomes like a version of complicated grief, or a complex grief, where it's like having to deal with something where no one else can know about it. So there's different ways grief is showed or not showed.
So as a DiMartini facilitator, then in 2009, you started to take that even further, Tanya. What I want to ask as a question, just kind of leading on that, is, as a coach of business owners and entrepreneurs, what do you see as like a common thread or a common thing that seems to hold most people back from actually really getting to where they want to be, feeling how they want to feel, or achieving what they want to achieve in business?
I mean, we often talk in our maximum growth classes, which is our group coaching classes, it's our growth ceilings that really prevent us from moving ahead, moving forward. And so what we would call a growth ceiling is, it could be anything in any area of life that you think that next level up, I fear there's like, well, I don't want to outlive or do better than what my dad did. If I made more money, maybe my family wouldn't love me, or they'd want more from me. Maybe there's a drive and desire that if you got out there more and you served more, that you would experience more public criticism, and then that scares you, and you're like, I don't want that. So it's really looking and exploring that world that you perceive you would experience if you did step up. And what are the fears and challenges, or the issues that you perceive that might arise that would actually then prevent you from taking a step forward? So really uncovering that is important step in terms of like stepping forward.
That's a big one, isn't it? Because most people have this idea, well, if I become more successful, I'm going to be more admired and I'm going to have more positives and it's all going to be great. And then they get there and it's like, I wasn't expecting this.
If you've seen the David Beckham, Netflix documentary? I mean, that's like, he's someone who's like on a mission and loves what he does, but has also had to deal with the duality of the extreme of fans who really like him and that like detest him and think that he lost the whole, World Cup for England and it's all his fault and he has to take blame. So he takes a lot of credit and he also takes a lot of blame. But you can only really, if we have to be able to rise to the degree that we can handle the negative criticism and challenge, because if not, we just want this one-sided world and we want all this praise, but we're not prepared to have the opposite side. We're not prepared to take the challenge. So we almost need to become more resilient.
So how would a person go about trying to do that for themselves then? They become more conscious of that and become more aware of that. How would they be able to look at that from a different perspective and keep moving forward?
Yeah, for sure. So anytime we think about something in the future, it's based upon something experienced in the past, because the future is fantasized. It's what we think, oh my gosh, I wouldn't want that. But it's something that we've experienced or witnessed in the past. So I'm thinking of one particular individual, and they had said, I would really love to go out and start speaking and putting my work out and putting their message out more. But they've been able to see that another individual in a similar field, not the same, but similar, had received some criticism from one phrase that they had said, and then had just been chopped down by their followers because of that one phrase. And so they had projected on, watching this experience, projected on thinking, oh, if I go through that, I couldn't handle that, and then minimize themselves. And so that isn't their experience. But what we would do is be able to find, well, how did it serve this individual? What did they learn and grow? How did it serve the community? What would have been the drawback if it was the opposite way? So we dissolve any attachment to wanting people to praise and get likes and attention. So we want to do dissolve that. And then that starts to kind of shift and dissipate, and you appreciate the way that it is. So that's like an experience that when someone else has gone through it and you build up an emotional charge around it. And there also might be experiences that you've had in your past where, for example, sometimes it can stem from childhood, where you wanted to play from friends and they rejected you. And you played with the next group of friends and they rejected you, and the next group of friends, and your perception, they rejected you. So you built up these emotional charges that when you go out to the world, people reject you. And that emotional charge gets stored inside of your body and your physiology. So anytime you think about, I'm going to go out again, you're like, I'm going to get rejected. And so we want to go back to those moments and do the same process that I just shared before, which is the benefits of the way that it was and the drawbacks if it was the opposite. And so we can just start to balance the scale out and the perceptions out, so we can have more appreciation for the way that it was. And the result of dissolving that emotional charge that we have in the past, we then don't project that into the future. We don't push that into the future, because there's not that they're charged. And you go, I'm so grateful for that. Yeah. And so then we can become more grateful. If someone was to criticize us, we can have more gratitude and appreciation for it.
Yeah. And see how it serves. Yeah. So Tanya, for you, talking a wee bit about voids then, if you want to explain a wee bit more, then what is a void for people that are listening in, and what was the biggest voids that have kind of driven you to become who you've become? And are voids healthy? Are they always needed? Can they be dissipated or cleared and balanced out? So that the question I'm asking is, sometimes those voids can be like a chip on your shoulder. They can be something that, as you said, something happened. Maybe you didn't get out to play with your friends, or they kind of disregarded you, didn't want to have anything to do with you, but then that drives you forward. So are all voids healthy, and what do they do in terms of actually shaping who you become?
So a void is, if you imagine that you're hungry and you then go and seek food because you've got an empty belly and you want to fill it, and then you fill it filled with it after you've eaten, you feel saturated or satiated in this case, and then you go on to something else. You go and do something else to fulfill your time and your space and your energy. And so a void essentially is something you perceive to be missing in your childhood, or something that wasn't there in your teen years, something that you perceive someone else had more of that you didn't. And so this builds up and stacks up. And I believe that, and what I've noticed is that people have maybe one void that gets stacked up again and again and again. It's like it just shows up in different forms. So people can have voids of money, of connection, of parenting. So people have different voids. And so essentially, if people did emotional personal development work, you would be able to dissolve your voids and your emotional charge around the void. But it doesn't really completely dissolve, because it still becomes it's still something that's significant that happens, becomes a driving force for you today. So let me explain in terms of when my parents separated when I was young. Because we went to a Catholic school, my brother and I were sent into a program called the Rainbow Kids. So the Rainbow Kids there was about 12 of us in this small circle that we had to go on the top floor of the school. And then we have to do this group counseling, because we came from divorced parents. I mean, I think at the moment they have kids who are from the parents that were still together that would have to all get together and, do some counseling for their parents still being together, because the majority are separated. But so I'm having to do counseling, and I'm kind of having this experience. Well, maybe there's something wrong with me. My mum has, doesn't want to spend so much time with us, or with me. I'm feeling like there's something wrong with me, and then going through this counseling experience and feeling like someone's telling me something is wrong with you. So I'm having these experiences. And then we went to counseling as a family counseling when my parents got married. And then it was again like, there's something wrong with us, or something wrong with me. And that happened multiple times over my childhood, my teen years. And so that void created inside of me this feeling like, innately there's I'm just going to talk about it in polarizing language, but I felt like innately there was something wrong with me. So then for a long period of time, I did different things to try and fill that void. Some of it immediate gratification stuff, some of it, just sleeping a lot because I was just trying to escape, because I didn't know how else to kind of deal with this. And then I came into personal development. And so during that period of time, in order to what I felt like healing that void, I did a lot of DiMartini methods, which I felt like was a fast and efficient way to resolve my emotional dynamic. And so the result of that is I feel very healed from that. And so it's no longer a driving force to change my behavior, to do DiMartini method lines and do lots of personal development, but instead I found a vision for me. So I've moved my void and my current value of personal development, my void of feeling like there's something wrong and lacking, the being able to see the perfection in life and make any of the connections work and understand what was happening, to wanting to understand personal development, to then creating a vision to be able to impact or to educate and inspire leaders on human behavior and human awareness and dynamics, so that they can have a greater influence on raising the level of consciousness for humanity. And so I've taken what was a void and pain, like there's something wrong, and that, really trying to find that perfection and connection in life, to then putting it into my personal development, which is my everyday behavior, and now creating the void, which is now in the future vision. Fantastic. And so I've still got a void, and I'm still driving towards that. I'm still wanting to fill it, but it's no longer the past that's driving, that's out of pain and suffering and I want to get away from, but it's this beautiful, like I call it fluency with your future and congruency with your past. So you get congruency with where you've been into fluency to where you're going. And so now my void in the future is very much about like, how do I help and empower other people? And I've gone almost, one of the things that we're really big in Maximum Growth is like, also at the business level, when we come the mid-tier level for the membership, it's more about like, how do you get over the individualistic constraints, aka your own personal voids, to then the constraints and be about humanity, and how do you raise your awareness to be bigger, which is that stretching out to having a bigger void in vision, in the view of a vision that will help drive you and move you.
And that's, I suppose, trying to take yourself out of the equation and thinking about when you're trying to create a bigger vision, a lot of the times it's trying to take yourself out, like your immediate needs and the things that you want to achieve. Take yourself out of that equation, which is really, really hard to do if you've got those voids that haven't been resolved driving you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, we get stuck in our own stuff sometimes. And we have a lot, like some people have a lot. Some people have gone through some really complex trauma and they're having to deal with a lot, and they've, not had great stability within their home and their family life. And so they have a lot to work through. But But there does come a point, though, one of the things we did one of our little mini classes on recently was on that. Do you use the work and your own personal development to go in and resolve your past pain or level up? And there has to come a point where you're like, enough of the pain, enough of like having more pain to work through and more suffering to work through, another challenge to go and do your personal development. There has to come a point where you switch that from the I focus to the greater, bigger humanity. And you know what? If humanity is your family, then great. If humanity is the entire world, then great. Like, it's not better or worse to do one or the other. It's just that we want to grow out bigger than ourselves, or do something that's greater and bigger than ourselves. Yeah,
from a healthier perspective, I suppose, as well too. So that would lead into then and the maximum growth, Tanya. I suppose give us a wee bit more of insight then into like what's involved in maximum growth. You created that in 2020, correct?
I did. So 2020 had been bubbling up inside me for since 2016, and then COVID happened. So it was an opportunity to really go online and start this maximum growth that I've been thinking about. So it's online group coaching. We focus just with coaches because I'm really inspired if I can get coaches out doing really amazing work and serving their clients, and we can make a really big impact on humanity. And so we do different types of classes. We have mindset classes to really help you with the foundation. So a lot of that is based on Dr. Demartini's principles and his methodology that he has. So we have that class. I also have classes for business, which helps you to kind of work through your roadblocks that you have around stepping up and getting your service. Almost like, what are the things that are in the way that you need to shift and clear in order for you to get your service out to the world. And then we have there's up to 4, maybe sometimes 5 people in a coach's class, which is our next level, and they're very intimate. And you get a 30-minute session, and then we do a debrief, and then we do the next session after the debrief, debrief. And so you get to watch after 14 years. I know a bit, and I'm good at finding like the problem underneath the problem, and then I can deconstruct that session and tell the people, why do we go certain ways and why do we do this? And so there's a lot of nuances that you learn from a coaching perspective in those classes. So essentially we have like 3 buckets of why people would come. So one is they're really stuck on their identity. They just don't know who they are. They want to coach and they have that drive inside of them, but they just don't know what's my niche, who am I serving? I'm probably still struggling with my own sense of identity. So they come in and they're part of our demographic that come in. We have another group who come in who know themselves, but they're still trying to figure out what's their individuality inside of coaching, because it's such a huge industry. It's like where you can end up sinking in it. So it's like, what is going to help you to stand out and your individuality to be expressed? Because we're really big on like, how do you get to express yourself as a coach that you feel like your public persona and your private persona are the same. So it's not like you put your coaching hat on and it's like you do all this, but behind the scenes, like kind of like a personal trainer sometimes. They're like eating pizza, feeling really guilty and going out and like looking like fit and healthy, and I'm doing all this, but their private life is different. So coaches can feel the same way, where they're just like, they feel like they're having a meltdown, and it's like, well, I can't be doing this because what do my people say? So it's like, how do we merge those two together so you can feel like you're one and the same no matter what environments? We're really big on that with individuality. And then we have the other group of people who come in to see us because they know they're themselves, they know their service, they know what they're here to do, and they just want inspiration, which is like, how do we really untap you? Which they might be at that stage where they want to start their own group coaching, or they want to grow their group coaching, or they want to grow their client base, and they just want to get out there and inspire and do more in the world. And so we have people who are in that bracket as well. So we've got 3 different demographics that come in of coaches and at different levels, and we help them with different like growth maps, which will help them to achieve their unique goal.
Fantastic, Tanya. And ending the podcast, the podcast is called Conversations That Matter. I always ask, if you were to have a conversation with yourself at any time, maybe when you were being challenged most, maybe when you were younger, etc. But if you were to have a conversation with yourself at any time, what would you say to yourself?
I would say that in your darkest night births your lightest lights.
Fantastic. Tanya, thank you very, very much for hopping on the podcast. It was really, really inspiring. Really enjoyed chatting. And I think there's a lot more that we could delve back into again. So maybe we get you back on again at a future date.
Love to, Seamus. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, really, really enjoyed it. Tanya, for people that are looking for your services and looking for your coaching, where's the best place to find you?
The best space is maximumgrowth.co, and you can find there, or at my website, which is also tanyacross.com.
Fantastic. Tanya, thank you very much.
You're welcome.